Hey folks, welcome. Human Development, a Lifespan View. Chapter 14, The Personal Context of Later Life, Physical, Cognitive, and Mental Health Issues. We're going to get into all the issues. What happens when you get old? By the end of this chapter, you should be able to describe the trends in aging and longevity, summarize physiological changes, major diseases, and leading theories, describe the typical cognitive changes related to aging, describe common mental health disorders in adults. All right. What are older adults like? Let's figure out a good spot for this. Probably over here. That thing's a little annoying. Can we get rid of it? No. Oops. Sorry, y'all. I'm trying to figure out the best spot for this thing. All right, maybe it'll be down here. Key questions. What are the characteristics of older adults in the population? How long will most people live? What factors influence this? And what is the distinction between the third age and the fourth age? This is not working. All right, let's try this. There we go. That'll work. Okay, demographics of aging. Demographers are people who study population trends. They use population pyramids, a graphic technique for illustrating population trends. To do this, the number of older adults in developed nations will increase even more by 2050. The number of older Asian Americans, Native Americans, and especially Latino individuals will continue to increase. This is a wild statistic. The number of U.S. people over 85 will increase by 500% between 2000 and 2050. So in those 50 years, there will be 5 times as many people who are over 85. And that is actually just projecting current technology. There's a ton of new developments. Some good books on this topic are Outlive by Peter Attia. Brian Johnson, who was a founder of Venmo, is sort of becoming a popular figure in the life extension movement. David Sinclair is another person who's a popular figure in the life extension movement, along with Rhonda Patrick. These are all professors, doctors, Walter Longo. So this is developmental psychology is a science that is changing as human society changes, as we develop differently. So society has been undergoing some dramatic changes and will continue to as people continue to live longer and longer. Okay, the sheer number of older Americans will place enormous stress on the federal income support system, especially Social Security, healthcare, especially Medicare, Medicaid, and long-term care and other human services. So hopefully, people will be healthier as they live longer and they will continue to work. So a lot of the things are going to be about, what percentage of people are working as they get older and things like that. So, if people are disabled and they're living longer, that's a problem. If people are just working longer, then that's different and changes things in different and possibly interesting ways. I'm not in love with the fact that both of our presidential candidates are 80 years old plus, but it is interesting. I think they're probably both too old to do the job in the way it needs to be done. However, it does highlight the fact that, look, they're campaigning. They've convinced people to support them, some people at least. And, there is obviously structural reasons why we ended up with that, not to get too bogged down. But anyways, there's a lot of older people in the workforce. And that will probably continue. Not just will there be more older people, but there will also be more older people who are able to live independently and work and things like that. So this is a rapidly evolving kind of area of study. Diversity of older adults. Older adults in the United States outnumber older men. This is your ethnic racial group. So men are dying at a slightly higher rate. So interestingly, humans have essentially evolved grandmothers, right? That's not an accident. If there's anything about humans, it's not an accident, right? Everything is shaped by evolution. So we essentially evolved what you might call grandmothers, older women, to guide and nurture and give advice to the tribe to help it survive. And we're not the only species, actually. So orcas, killer whales, and elephants also, you see the same thing. And these are highly social, highly intelligent species that require essentially an older person with knowledge of the environment and various other kinds of knowledge for survival of the group. And we are one of 3 species in which that evolved. By 2025, China expects to have more than 300 million people over the age of 65, which is crazy. It's almost the population of the United States. Challenges including providing services and living arrangements for the aging population. The global general aging of the population is due mainly to two factors: declining birth rates in many countries and people living longer due to improvements in healthcare. Longevity, the number of years a person can expect to live. Maximum longevity, the oldest age to which any person has lived, around 120 years. Active life expectancy, the number of years that a person is free from debilitating chronic disease and impairment. Dependent life expectancy is the number of years a person lives with debilitating chronic disease in which the person depends on others for care. And average longevity is the age at which half the people born in a particular year will die in the United States. So again, these things are fluid. They're already in flux. They're already changing in the past several decades. They will continue to change even more dramatically. Genetic and environmental factors in life expectancy. Our average longevity is influenced by most by genetic, environmental, racial, ethnic, and gender factors. About 25% of the variation in human longevity is due to genetics. So 25%. So this says our longevity is influenced by these different factors, environmental and genetic, essentially. So environment is 75%, and environment includes things like exposure to toxins, but also lifestyle. How much do you drink? Do you smoke? How much do you exercise? So, research is showing that people need to do quite a number of hours of intense exercise, not just moderate exercise, but to really get maximum lifespan benefits. Environment plays a role through the effects of disease, toxins, poverty, and risky behaviors. The worst thing you can do for your health and longevity is to be born poor. Social class plays a role due to lack of access to healthcare, but also lifestyle as well. Stress damages the body, and not having time or mental capacity. Right, when you're poor, and you're under stress, that reduces your mental capacity to do positive things for yourself. Okay, ethnic and gender differences in life expectancy. People in different ethnic groups do not have the same average longevity at birth, but these gaps change with increasing age. These differences have changed in recent years. The pandemic accelerated some changes further. Women have a longer average life expectancy at birth, about 5 years than men. Countries around the world differ dramatically in how long their populations live on average. Some Asian countries like Japan and Okinawa. There's some places in Italy, places where people get a lot of physical exercise just through walking and gardening. They eat fresh, healthy food, and they have really strong social connections. Those are places, sometimes these are called blue zones, where people tend to live more commonly to 100 than other places. There's one place in the United States, Loma Linda, California, where there's a lot of Seventh-day Adventists who tend to be vegetarian, eat very healthy, exercise a lot. That is a blue zone in the United States. The fourth age distinction. The third age, ages of 60 to 80. The young old. Knowledge and technical advances contribute to their better quality of life. So here's the good news about aging. People actually tend to get happier as they age. This is maybe one of the most surprising things if you're not sort of familiar with the research on, aging and psychology. And, the most surprising thing is that people tend to get happier, which, of course, I think that's highly fascinating. It could mean a lot of things, but I think one of the things it means is that our happiness to a large extent is dependent on us, right? I mean, also on our environment, but we tend to get better over time, right? So essentially we start the world as a baby who knows nothing about itself or the environment. We gradually learn and learn. And when we're young, when we're kids, we're just sort of like, I don't know, a leaf floating down a stream. We're just sort of getting blown along, and life is pushing us this way and that. And we're learning things and we're growing, but it's like gradually, it takes us a while to sort of get strong enough to like hold on to a log. Now we're holding on to a log floating down the stream. Now we're not just like totally being tossed and turned. And eventually we learn to steer the ship, right? And older people actually do things different. They approach situations differently than younger people do. And it seems like that difference in approach makes them happier. Okay. Fourth age is over 80, the oldest old. Few interventions have been developed to assist this group. Major focus is the choice of housing and whether to age in place, basically staying in home versus going into a nursing care facility. Here's where you start to see what you start to see with aging is like a slow, steady decline in terms of like physical health, physical functioning. And then you get like a drop off in the last few years. High prevalence of dementia, 50%, people over 90, frailty, multiple chronic conditions, and problems with quality of life and dying with dignity. There's only one, maybe there's a couple now states that allow people dying with dignity to choose when to end their life. If you go to a nursing home anywhere else in the country, and probably even most nursing homes in those places as well, what you'll find is a lot of people in absolutely miserable conditions, suffering a lot. A lot of suffering could be prevented if we as a society embrace this dying with dignity concept. Okay, 14.2, physical changes and health. Key questions for 1.2 section. What are the major biological theories of aging? What physiological changes normally occur later in life? What are the principal health issues for older adults? Metabolic theories. So here are some theories of aging. Metabolic theories. And what I'll do is I will post some links to other videos on this topic because I think it's a really important one. It's not covered enough in depth. So I will put them in the description box if you're interested in more of this stuff. Metabolic theories posit that organisms have limited energy to expand in a lifetime. A person's metabolism is related to how long they live. Cellular theories point to aging at the cellular level. So this could be a mitochondrial dysfunction is a common theory. Mitochondria are the organelles in the cells that make energy. Everything in our body depends on energy. Without it, we die. So gradually, as our cellular energy goes down, our cells start to sort of function less effectively and bad things start to happen. Another thing that happens at the cellular level is that we get more and more information loss, right? So we get genetic mutations, damage to our DNA. Every time our cells divide, they copy all our DNA. Those minor errors can add up over time to reduce functioning. Some causes, or one cause that's been thought to maybe be. So right now we know all these different things that happen that go down when we age, right? So our bone density goes down, our muscle mass goes down, our various cognitive abilities go down, our telomeres, which I'll talk about in a second, shorten. We accumulate DNA damage, our mitochondria stop functioning as effectively. All different things go down. Our VO2 max, right? Our cardiorespiratory health tends to go down. We accumulate beta amyloid plaques in our brain. We accumulate cholesterol and clogs in our arteries. The question is, what is driving this process? We know a lot of things go down, wrinkles in our skin, but what's actually causing this? Is there one cause? Is there multiple causes? So right now we're understanding how all the different systems in our body decline. We're really good at measuring that. We're learning ways to reverse those changes, those negative changes, but we haven't really gotten okay, here's the one thing that causes all of aging. And maybe there is no one thing. That's an open question. So telomeres are these little tips, kind of like the tips of your shoelaces on the ends of our DNA. They wear down over time. When they disappear, then the cell becomes senescent, which is a whole different topic, but essentially not great for our body overall. And so, telomere shortening is another theory. Oxidative stress. So oxidative stress essentially can be combated by consuming antioxidants, but oxidative stress causes DNA damage, amongst other kinds of damage. Another theory is that genetic programming. Theories suggest that aging is programmed into our genetic code by a pre-programmed cell death. So there's these things called DNA methylation tests, and you can see exactly how old someone is based on DNA methylation, which is a different topic, but essentially you're looking at someone's genome and you can see different parts of it are what they call methylated. It just means there's a methyl molecule there. So this process happens very routinely from birth up to childhood and then continues according to a certain pattern. Now, certain things can reverse DNA methylation, etc. So it seems like some of this is pre-programmed in, but doesn't necessarily mean it's not reversible. So a lot of this stuff is kind of ongoing, but at a really interesting stage in terms of the research. Okay, here is more clear. We know what are the changes that are happening here. This is sort of easier to observe. Neuronal changes are common in older age. People's neurons, some of them are dying. So sometimes Alzheimer's is referred to type 3 diabetes, can have to do with blood flow going to the brain. We have little tiny capillaries that are only large enough for one red blood cell to fit through. And if those blood cells can't get through for various reasons, like our arteries are clogged, our capillaries are clogged, then parts of our brain will die. There's going to be a lot of various changes. White matter in the brain decreases, but you can increase white matter through movement and learning new movements. So there's a lot of different changes in terms of how quickly neurons are able to function, how effectively they're able to function. Beta amyloid plaques can interfere with a lot of different memory functions. Do cells start to die in various parts of the brain? So Alzheimer's disease, of course, a very common brain disorder in older people. Levels of neurotransmitters, chemicals released by neurons in order for them to communicate with each other, decline with age. Numbers of neurofibrillary tangles, spiral-shaped masses formed when fibers of the axon become twisted together, which interfere with the neuron's ability to transmit information down the axon. And concentrations of beta amyloid, the protein that is the basis for neuritic plaques, damaged or defective neurons that form around a core of protein that's thought to be the basis for dementia. These things can be measured with structural neuroimaging and functional neuroimaging. Looking at the cardiovascular and respiratory systems, two important age-related structural changes in the heart are accumulation of fat deposits and the stiffening of the heart muscle caused by tissue changes. A recent study was just done where they had people do vigorous exercise, so hours a week of intense exercise for 2 years. And these were sedentary 50-year-old adults. And at the end of the study, they had the heart of a 30-year-old. Like, you could look at it on a scan and you could not tell that this heart was not from a 30-year-old. And so doing intense, vigorous exercise for anything you do, even a couple minutes a day, is helpful. But optimally, probably an hour to 2 hours per week of intense exercise, along with other forms of exercise. Atherosclerosis is a disease caused by calcification and blockages in the arteries. Transient ischemic attacks or brief interruptions of blood flow to the brain, often early warning sign of strokes. Strokes or cerebrovascular accidents are interruption of blood flow to the brain due to blockage or hemorrhage in a cerebral artery. So when a person has a stroke, part of their brain dies. They may lose the ability to walk or talk, things like that. Vascular dementia, disease caused by numerous small cerebrovascular accidents. COPD, most common form of incapacitating respiratory disease among adults. Basically, COPD stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Pulmonary is just lungs. Your lungs are chronically obstructed. Okay, so a lot of what's going to happen, a lot of comments or trajectory for older people is they're at home, their decline is sort of gradually going down, they're not walking as good, they're not, maintaining their health through exercise, things like that. They're not sort of, if you want to be able to continue to do certain things like walking, you need to be able to exercise your body and move your body in a way that facilitates that. So, but typically people will have a gradual decline, and then they'll have some event. Could be a heart attack, could be a stroke, maybe it's an open heart surgery, or it could be like a fall and they break their hip. This hospitalizes them for a period of time, and then they're often never the same. Maybe they can walk, but just barely, or maybe they can't walk at all. You end up in a nursing home, and then, a few years later, you die from another heart attack, or even quite commonly just a flu or something like that as your health gradually goes down. Sensory changes, vision, age-related structural changes, presbyopia, difficulty seeing close objects clearly, cataracts, opaque spots on the lens that limit the amount of light transmitted, glaucoma, a disease in which the fluid in the eye does not drain properly, causing very high internal pressure that can damage the eye and cause loss of vision, age-related retinal diseases, age-related macular degeneration, progressive and irreversible destruction of their receptors from any number of causes. There was a recent study where, so there's actually these things called the Yamanaka factors, Yamanaka, discovered by Japanese scientists, and he basically discovered how to reverse the age of any cell. The researchers fairly recently injected these Yamanaka factors and repaired the optic nerves of rats. So that was an interest. That was like the first time they'd been used in a living organism. So that's pretty interesting. Diabetic retinopathy in eye disease is a byproduct of diabetes, causing damage to the arteries and the retina that can lead to other problems. So one of the complications of diabetes, which goes along with typically obesity, but even just sort of normal aging, weight gain will lead to diabetes, what passes for normal in America in our current society. So essentially the nerves in the eyes get damaged. This can also happen in the feet. So you'll see people with diabetes have to get their feet amputated or their lower parts of their legs amputated. Not fun stuff. Sensory changes hearing. Presbycusis, reduced sensitivity to high frequency tones. So basically people tend to lose hearing as they get older, fairly common. Other senses, taste, touch, temperature, and pain sensitivity are not significantly age-related. Although there is an aging test where essentially you have an object that has kind of two little pokey things like needles, and you poke a person's foot and you gradually adjust the distance. So you start wide apart and you ask them if they can tell that it's two separate pokes or one poke. And you get smaller and smaller. When people are younger, they can distinguish between very small distances as two pokes. As people get older, they tend to feel it as one poke. So there are changes, but not as profound or important. Detecting and distinguishing smells substantially declines in many after the age of 70. Very true in Alzheimer's. Older people fall more due to changes in balance, eyesight, hearing, muscle tone, and reflexes. Big problem. So those are all things that can be, well, aside from eyesight. Eyesight and hearing can be worked on somewhat, but balance, muscle tone, reflexes, these things can all be worked on and should be by any older person. Okay. Oh my God. Chronic diseases and health issues. Diabetes mellitus is a disease that occurs when the pancreas produces insufficient insulin. So type 1 diabetes is basically accumulated damage over time. Type 2 diabetes is different. It's an autoimmune disorder where the body's immune system attacks the pancreas. These people can be young. They don't have to be overweight, anything like that. Cancer, second leading cause of death in the United States behind cardiovascular disease. Two important factors for staying healthy are sleep and nutrition. Sleeping 8 hours a night, basically 7.5 to 9 hours a night is extremely important, as is eating healthy. Can't really take a whole course on that topic, but Dr. Greger actually recently came out with a book called How Not to Die, which includes a lot of things, but a lot about diet. Actually, his book's called How Not to Age. He does have a book called How Not to Die, but his book on aging is called How Not to Age. Okay, cognitive processes. 14.3. Key questions. What are some key aspects of cognitive aging? What changes occur in memory with age? What can be done to remediate these changes? What are creativity and wisdom, and how do they relate to age? Describing cognitive aging. Speed of processing is how quickly a person reacts to make a specific response. It slows with age in all situations, but especially in ambiguous ones. Lifestyle factors such as diet, stress, and substance use and exercise, and environmental factors such as education influence aging. Education obviously doesn't directly influence aging, but if you're more educated, you're more likely to exercise regularly, more likely to be higher in socioeconomic status, have access to healthcare, more likely to be in a place where you have access to a gym and a lifestyle and friends where that's normal and things like that. The most important criterion for judging whether a particular cognitive change matters is determining the degree to which it affects the person's daily life. Memory. Working memory is the process and structures involved in holding and using information, problem solving, decision making, and learning. So working memory is highest in our early years. It just sort of is a gradual decline from there. Now, again, you can maintain function by keeping your body as close to possible as being in its early 20s state. Run 50 miles a week for your whole life, and your working memory will probably be pretty good when you're older. But typically, on average, it tends to decline gradually. These are some of the different aspects of working memory: explicit memory, semantic memory, episodic and implicit. We won't go into all of that, but it is worth noting that older people tend to remember things from a long time ago better than newer things, right? So those older memories that are burned in place often stay with them, but forming new memories, which requires a lot of different kind of coordinated processes in the brain, which may not be working as effectively, that's not going to be as easy. Okay, when memory change is abnormal, most people worry about memory loss and its possible implications for disease. A serious problem may be suspected when memory failures interfere with everyday life. Detecting whether memory problems are serious requires thorough testing through physical and neurological examinations and batteries of neuropsychological tests. There was one study that showed just by eating blueberries every day, in like 8 weeks, older individuals could improve their memory. Imagine if you ate them every day. Okay. Remediating memory problems, external memory aids, internal memory aids, mental processes such as imagery, external memory aids, or like notebooks, calendars. People generally, until their memory goes really bad, as you get older, your working memory declines, like your actual cognitive abilities, but people get better at maximizing their capacities. So, skills related to remembering things tend to improve with age. Okay. Creativity and wisdom. Creativity is the ability to produce work that connects disparate ideas in novel ways. It is predicted by how much white matter connects distant brain regions and cognitive control. Generally increases through the 30s, peaking in the early 40s. Older adults produce fewer creative ideas. You can increase your white matter by moving your body, just so you know. Baltes and colleagues describe wisdom as dealing with important matters of life and the human experience, having superior knowledge, judgment, and insight, depth and balance, and being used with good intentions, combining mind and virtue. Wisdom is unrelated. Recently, researchers posited a consensus model of wisdom, understanding which actions fit which situations at hand. But people tend to get more wise, but they don't always. You can always remain unwise as you get older. So it's not guaranteed that you're going to get older, but hopefully you do. Not guaranteed that you're going to get wiser, but hopefully you do. Here is the common wisdom model. Focuses on central aspects of wisdom, such as perspectival metacognition, which is what we understand about our knowledge. This includes balance of viewpoints, epistemic humility, basically not thinking you know everything, context adaptability, being able to assume multiple perspectives. It's grounded in context, cultures, and experiences, and moral aspirations. Perspective metacognition is essential to implement abstract moral concepts, see through illusion, self-deception, and assist in survival-oriented coordination and long-term planning. So it's sort of being able to think about your own thinking, right? That's one of the things that separates maybe a wise person from an unwise person. They are aware that they don't know everything. They're aware that there's varying contexts and different people have different experiences. And in this theory, they're tying a certain level of morality or ethical aspiration to wisdom. So it's not a value neutral concept. Okay, 1.4, mental health and intervention. 14.4. Mental health and intervention. Key question: how does depression in older adults differ from depression in younger adults? How is it diagnosed and treated? How are anxiety disorders treated in older adults? What is Alzheimer's disease? How is it diagnosed and managed? What causes it? Okay. There are age-related differences in the symptoms examined in diagnosing depression. The rate of depression declines from young adulthood to old age for healthy people. The downward trend does not hold for all cultures. Chinese adults show higher rates of depression over time. The feeling, this is complicated when you see a finding like that. Are Chinese people actually getting more depressed as they get older? Maybe in their culture, there's strong taboos against expressing certain things. So maybe as they get older, they're just more willing to express them. Maybe it's a cohort effect, right? Maybe it's, older Chinese people went through really difficult times in China that are not present now. So it's not a straightforward simple thing that like, oh, in Chinese culture, older people are more depressed. But it is interesting. It's hard to know what to make of it, though. The feeling symptom cluster includes dysphoria, feeling sad or down. The physical symptom cluster includes loss of appetite, insomnia, and trouble breathing. These must be carefully evaluated as symptoms of depression because they may reflect normal age-related changes or have other physical, neurological, or metabolic or substance abuse-related causes. Anxiety disorders. Anxiety disorders involve excessive irrational dread about everyday situations, including irrational severe anxiety, phobias, obsessions, or compulsions. They're common in older adults, partly due to loss of health, relocation of residence, isolation, loss of independence. They can often be successfully treated with relaxation therapy and medications, e.g. benzodiazepines, SSRIs, beta blockers, and buspirone. So older people in general tend to get happier and healthier mentally. But as people get older and they end up in nursing home type situations, anxiety and depression are highly prevalent. People are worried. A lot of people there just want to die, right? That's a pretty intense state of depression. A lot of people there are worried about their health. They're worried about their family members. They're worried about, all different things that they can't control. You don't have a lot of freedom. You don't have a lot of autonomy. And it's also hard to, you can be prescribed medication and they'll have you take them if you're in a nursing home facility, but it can be very difficult to do a CBT exercise, do a relaxation exercise, to do daily habits that help you when you're 90 years old or 85 or even 75 or even 65. If you're, have a disability, you're missing a leg, you're significantly obese, things like that. Dementia. Dementia is a family of diseases involving serious impairment of behavioral and cognitive functioning and some form of permanent damage to the brain. Alzheimer's disease, which is marked by gradual declines in memory, attention, and judgment, confusion as to time and place, difficulties in communicating, decline in self-care skills, inappropriate behavior, and personality changes are the most common form of dementia. It often includes incontinence, the loss of control of bladder or bowels, right? So that would make you depressed if you couldn't control that, potentially. Only autopsies provide definitive diagnosis. They should reveal very large numbers of neurofibrillary tangles, structural neuronal changes, and amyloid plaques. Diagnosis of AD is based on extensive neurological, physiological, and medical testing to rule out other causes and interviewing the family for their accurate reports of behavioral symptoms. What causes Alzheimer's is not known for sure at the time. Early onset is caused mainly by genetics. Later forms of Alzheimer's disease, more complicated, involving complex interaction of several genes. There is a gene for Alzheimer's disease, which makes it much more likely. And I am not going to remember the name of it, but if you Google it, in fact, I can do that right now. Alzheimer's gene. It's the ApoE gene. ApoE gene. So that's a genetic test that you can have done to know what your risk is, but the things you can do to minimize risk are basically the same. If you want to essentially reduce your risk of Alzheimer's to zero, just be in perfect physical shape, be able to run a mile in 6 minutes, be able to, do 10 pull-ups, something like that. Then you probably don't have to worry about that. Keep your body fat under 12%, just little things like that. What can be done for victims of Alzheimer's disease? Cannot be treated or prevented. Drugs provide little long-term relief. Some symptoms can be alleviated. This is why it's really a very terrifying disease. Parkinson's disease is a brain disease known primarily for its characteristic motor symptoms, very slow walking, difficulty getting into and out of chairs, and a slow hand tremor, but it can develop into a form of dementia. It's caused by deteriorating dopamine production in the midbrain. Symptoms are treated by drugs that raise dopamine and aid its delivery to the brain. So early treatment of Parkinson's disease can dramatically slow down the disease's progression. CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy, form of dementia caused by repeated head trauma such as concussions. So people that play football. And this can even be from a small amount of concussions. But obviously, risks are football players, mixed martial arts, boxing, even some soccer players can get concussions. I mean, obviously, any sport you can, but that hitting the ball, probably not great for the brain. Chapter summary. Now that the lesson has ended, you should have learned how to describe trends in aging and longevity, summarize physiological changes, major diseases, and leading theories of aging, describe the typical cognitive changes related to aging, describe common mental health disorders in older adults. All right, y'all. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk